So we come to chapter 5, and we're still asking the question, what about the Canaanites? And in this chapter I try not, I think, to provide a solution, because I don't think anything will make this problem go away or make it somehow less nasty than it actually was. But I think what we can do is to set it in a number of perspectives or contexts which help us to frame it biblically. And so in this chapter I explore first of all the fact that it does occur within the Old Testament, which doesn't mean I'm saying that means we don't need to bother about it, but we need to look at it in the context of ancient warfare and the ancient rhetoric of warfare and a number of the things that actually put it in a limited context in which it was. More important than that, I think we need to look at the fact that the Old Testament, and indeed the New, consistently puts the conquest of the Canaanites in the framework of God's judgment, sees it as an act of punishment upon a wicked and degraded society. And I think that's important because it changes the discourse. If we're talking about violence as an act of punishment, then it's different from mere genocide or random violence. So we need to explore that sense of the justice of God, which of course he also applied to the Israelites, because he not only used the Israelites to judge the Canaanites, he later used other nations to judge the Israelites as well. So God was consistent. And then the final context in which we look at is the whole Bible context of God's plan of salvation. Because we need to see that even in the Old Testament, God is still the God of grace and love. And so there's a great deal about care and love for the foreigner in the Old Testament. There is a vision of peace and the ending of warfare. And at the end of the day, we have to say this is part of the total biblical story which ultimately leads to Christ and to the cross, or to Calvary. And so I have to ask myself the question, what do I say to God who chose to use this part of the historical narrative as a way of bringing about my salvation, and your salvation, and the salvation of the world? So we have to set it in those broad contexts of the biblical story, and that's what we'll try to do in this chapter.